Today we're covering Unit 7, which is Nutrition and Digestion. So food's going to provide the raw materials for growth and the fuel to make it happen. So why do organisms need food? Well, food's going to be necessary for two reasons. One, it provides energy needed for all growth and activity, and two, it provides raw materials required for maintenance of life. So the food goes in, and then it needs to be digested. So digestion is going to be the process in which food is physically and chemically broken down into its main macromolecule components. So looking at these macromolecules, you'll see that's under nutrients. So with the nutrients, it's going to be substances used for energy, it's going to be used for raw materials, and maintenance of the body's systems. It's going to include water, proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, vitamins, and minerals. So how does species obtain food? Well, they're going to have to obtain their food through several different ways. So we have animals that are going to eat other animals. We're going to have animals that we're going to talk about that eat animals and plants. Then we're going to have those that just eat plants. So once they eat these things, the body digests it, breaks it down, takes its macromolecules, and then it's going to eliminate the waste, which is going to be the unusable materials that pass through the digestive system. They never actually enter into the body, and then it passes out through the elimination process. So with the different types of animals, first we have our carnivores. Those are going to be the animals that consume only meat, or other animals. And so example of these would be things like seals, wolves, hawks, and mosquitoes. Next, we have our herbivores. These are going to be animals that consume only plants. And so example of those are going to be things like deer, cows, horses, squirrels. Then you have your omnivores. These are going to be animals that consume both plants and animals. An example of that is going to be humans, raccoons, pigs, and chickens. So humans aren't going to be the only species that practice farming. And so farming is going to be practiced by other animals. You might not think of them as animals, but we have this ant here. He's going to be a leafcutter ant. So he's going to cultivate a fungus that he eats. It's only species other than humans that's going to be observed to have a system of agriculture. So where they go in and they farm what they want. Calories are actually going to count in an organism. Some people say they do, some people say they don't. Some people talk about different types of calories and how they count. So, calorie basically is going to be defined as the energetic value of a food. But more correctly, it's going to be defined energy required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water 1 degree Celsius. So that's going to be its technical term. However, when we talk about this is not going to be what you find on the back packaging of calories. When you look at the food that's on these packages, it's going to be intended for human consumption, and it's actually listed as kilocalories or 1,000-calorie units. So with a kilocalorie, that's the correct term. You're going to see it labeled on packages as 100 calories, but really it means 100 kilocalories or 100,000 calorie units. And it does get confusing because if you go to another country, you will see it labeled as that. Next we have what we call our basal metabolic rate, or the BMR. That's going to be the minimum amount of calories needed to run the body for a day. So the body is at rest, no food in the digestive tract, you have neutral temperature in an environment. Minimum amount of calories will be around 1,400 kilocalories a day for a 120-pound woman. A minimum of calories for a male at about 160 pounds is going to be about 1,700 kilocalories a day. And so here you see we have at rest. Now, if the person is actually going to be active, their daily energetic expenditure for that BMR is actually going to be a little bit higher. So individuals are going to need about 50% to 100% more kilocalories per day than the BMR when the body is active. So for women, it's going to be about 1,800 to 2,400 kilocalories a day if they're about 120 pounds. And for a male that's about 160 pounds, it would be anywhere from 2,400 to 3,200 kilocalories a day. So BMR is going to vary tremendously among different types of animal species. So we see here we have this tiny shrew. He's going to have a BMR of about 35 times higher than that of a human to its relative weight. And so here's going to be how you calculate the BMR of that shrew. So you take his body weight, which is 5 grams. You multiply the energy needed each hour, which is going to be about 35 calories per gram per hour. And then you multiply the hours in the day. So this animal will use 4.2 kilocalories a day. So nutrients are going to be grouped into 6 categories. Water is going to be one of the main essential nutrients. It's going to be one that plays an important role in intracellular fluid, extracellular fluid. It helps make up the blood, and it's going to be very important when it comes to metabolism. It's going to make up about 60 to 65% of the body's weight. So unlike food calories, none of this is going to be in storage. All the water is going to be part of the intracellular, extracellular, or interstitial fluids. So in general, a loss of 25% of the body's water will result in death. That's going to be extreme dehydration in that case. Water is going to serve many critical functions in the body, all of which become impaired during dehydration. So number 1, it's going to transport nutrients and waste throughout the body. Number 2, it's going to participate in chemical reactions, including ATP production. 3, it's going to act as a solvent for many vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and carbohydrates. 4, it's going to lubricate joints, the spinal cord, the eyes, and around the heart and lungs. And 5, it's going to help regulate body temperature. So for any energy expenditure of 2,000 kilocalories per day, the body's going to need about 2 to 3 liters of water obtained from food, drink, and chemical reactions. This amount is going to counteract the water lost through respiration, defecation, sweating, and urination. So a question is, can too much water be fatal? Well, yes, it can. If you have too much water, then you could dilute your system down. That system is going to rely on a lot of things such as electrolytes. Those electrolytes help carry electrical current throughout the body, and they're going to help things such as muscle contractions. They're going to help your nervous system react to things in the surrounding environment, so keep homeostasis going. And it's going to help with your heart. So if you dilute that system down and you don't have enough electrolytes and you have too much water, that system will not work. So you could actually go into cardiac failure, or you could cause a lot of other problems if you don't replace the electrolytes in with the water. Protein is going to be our next important component of nutrition. Proteins are going to be found in food, and they're going to be broken down to build proteins within the body. So proteins are going to be composed of long chains of amino acid. Some of the vital functions they help with are going to be major structural components of the cell. These are going to be needed for normal growth, repair, and maintenance of body tissues. Components of hemoglobin, antibodies, enzymes, and many hormones. And energy can be produced from these proteins. You get on average about 4 kilocalories per gram. During digestion, proteins are going to be broken down into amino acids. That's their smaller subunit group. There's going to be 2 types of amino acids. We have essential amino acids. These are going to be the amino acids not produced by the body, but rather they need to be consumed in foods. 8 amino acids are going to be essential. Out of the 20 total amino acids, your body can make 12 of those. Non-essential amino acids are going to be the ones that your body can make, and so it's not needed in foods. And so, like we said, there's going to be 12 non-essential amino acids. Now, looking at the proteins that you eat in your food that you see here, you can divide them further into 2 more groups. So these are going to be in with your essential amino acids, the ones that you have to take in through food. So your first one is a complete protein. is going to contain sufficient amounts of all 8 essential amino acids, and you can find it in any meat product such as beef, fish, poultry, and eggs. If it's an incomplete protein, these do not contain a sufficient amount of all 8 essential amino acids, so you're going to have to put these different proteins together in groups in order to get all 8 essential amino acids. And these are going to be things such as your leafy greens, vegetables, legumes, and grains. So for an adult, a dietary requirement is going to be about 10 to 15% of your total calorie intake. Now, if you're trying to gain more muscle mass and you've been exercising a lot, then you will need to up that amount. Next, we have our carbohydrates. Carbohydrates and lipids are going to provide the body with more energy. So with the carbohydrates, they mainly contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, usually with a hydrogen and oxygen present in a 2-to-1 ratio. So an example of that would be things like glucose, which is going to be the C6H12O6 that we talked about in previous units. It's going to be synthesized by photosynthesis in plants, and so you'll find these types of things in grains, cereals, breads, sugarcane, and things such as that, and fruits. So the vital functions of carbohydrates is that it's going to be a major energy source, especially during high-intensity exercise. With carbs, you'll get about 4 kilocalories per gram. It's going to help regulate fat and protein metabolism. It's actually going to be needed for the nervous system. Muscles and liver glycogen, which is going to be your energy reserve in animals, is going to be produced from these. So you have 3 different types of carbohydrates. Looking at these, you have your simple sugars. They're going to be made in a linear ring structure with 3 to 7 carbon atoms, broken down directly through glycolysis, releasing that energy. So an example of these simple sugars are going to be glucose and fructose. So they're broken down very easily, release energy quickly. Next, you have your disaccharides and digestible complex sugars. These are going to be, with the disaccharides, it's a 2 simple sugar bonded together, things like sucrose and lactose. If it's a digestible complex sugar, that's going to be a larger molecule with multiple simple sugars that are bonded together. And so those could be things such as starch and glycogen and glucose. Sorry, not glucose, glycogen. These are going to be held together with bonds of simple sugars that can be broken down for energy and released. So they don't break down as quickly as the simple sugars, but they're easily broken. Next, you're going to have your fiber. It's going to be a complex carbohydrate that forms structural parts of a plant. It's indigestible in humans, and it's going to play a significant role in digestion and health. So carbohydrates are going to be stored in animals in 2 areas. You can store it directly as glycogen in skeletal muscle and liver, or it can be converted into fat and stored in fat cells or adipose cells. Dietary requirements of carbs is going to be about 55 to 60% of your total calorie intake. Next, we have our lipids. Lipids are going to be primary energy storage form, but can also be used for ATP production. So they'll contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygens, and they include things like your fats, phospholipids, and sterols. Their vital functions are going to be essential components of cell membranes, so they make up those phospholipids. Essential components of nerve fibers, so they make up myelin. Myelin is going to be very important in surrounding the axon and helping that signal or nerve impulse travel quickly down the nerves or down the axon. And then with that, you have the essential components of nerve fibers. Like we said, we have primary energy source that's going to provide about 70% of energy when it's at rest. So this type actually has 9 kilocalories per gram, so it has a lot more energy to it, over double the energy that the protein and the carb had. It's going to support and cushion vital organs. Steroid hormones are going to be produced from cholesterols, which are going to be types of lipids. You also have fat-soluble vitamin transportation. Body heat is going to be regulated with the insulation from the subcutaneous fat that's found right underneath the dermis and epidermis. So with this, you're going to have two types of lipids. You have what's called your saturated fats. They consist of fatty acids with straight tails that are going to be tightly packed together. These are solid at room temperature, and they're going to be more likely to be stored as fat in the body. Next, you have your unsaturated fats. These consist of fatty acids that are going to have a little kink in the tail, or they're not going to be straight. They're going to be kind of zigzag that you see in the picture. These tend to be liquid at room temperature, and they're less likely to be stored as body fat. Now for the lipids, they're going to account for less than 30% of one's total caloric intake. So less than 10% of the total caloric intake should be from these saturated fats. So excess calories can be converted into fat storage. So you can take your complex sugars, and as you break them apart, the energy is going to be used. You have to use more energy to break them apart even more. You break them down to a simple sugar. Those sugar fragments then can be converted over and stored as fats or made into fatty acids, which are stored in the body. Usually they're going to be stored as adipose tissue or in that subcutaneous layer. Next, we're going to our vitamins. Vitamins and minerals are going to be necessary for good health. Vitamins and minerals are also going to be chemical elements. They're going to be needed in small amounts for enzymes and other molecules to function properly or to function at all. Some examples of these would be things like iron. That's going to be the atom within the hemoglobin protein that's physically going to bind to oxygen to help transport it throughout the body. So without iron, you would suffocate. So with the vitamins, they're going to be organic compounds. They're, like we said, essential for normal metabolic processes. They cannot be synthesized by the body in adequate amounts. Some can be made, but not in enough amounts that you actually can function properly. So you will need to take these in, usually through your food. But you don't have to take in a lot. So they're only required in relatively small amounts. So you're going to have two different types. You'll have what's called a lipid-soluble and a water-soluble. We'll talk about those in a minute. So with these vitamins, you're going to have 13 that are going to be essential to the human diet. They're going to be shown in the following chart along with our common food sources and things that roles in the body. Most of these vitamins are going to be water-soluble, but you'll have 4 that are going to be fat-soluble that are needed. So the 3 features are going to be common in all vitamins. They do not yield any usable energy. Rather, they're going to collaborate with enzymes to catalyze reactions. They need to be consumed in much smaller quantities than lipids, carbohydrates, and proteins. It's because they can be recycled and used again and again in your body. And with a healthy diet, you're going to consume enough of these vitamins and minerals that making supplementation unnecessary for most of us. And most of us don't have to take these fancy supplements that we see in the stores and on TV. So first, going in, we have our essential vitamins and minerals here. With these, you see, for example, vitamin B1. That's going to be like your thiamine. This is going to be a water-soluble vitamin. And what I mean by water-soluble vitamin is that if you take in too many, they're going to be excreted in the body's urine. And so you won't have a chance of toxicity usually, because usually it takes a lot to be toxic to the body. So the first one, you have vitamin B1, that is thiamine. The function of that is going to be oxidation of carbohydrates and synthesis of essential sugars like things such as acetylcholine synthesis also. These are going to be found in things like eggs, pork, nuts, liver, yeast, and whole grains. Next, you have B2, or riboflavin. The function of this is going to be an antioxidant of glucose and proteins. It can be found in things like yeast, meat, and vegetables. Next, you have niacin, which is going to be an important one. Its function is the oxidation of glucose synthesis and proteins and fats. It can be found in meats, fish, peas, and nuts. You have vitamin B6. It's going to be a group of compounds that are needed by many metabolic pathways involved in synthesis of proteins, various amino acids within the body. It helps make antibodies and nucleic acids. We can find these in things like bacteria, salmon, vegetables, fruit, and yogurts. Next, we have the pantothenic acid, and with that, it's going to function as part of a coenzyme A. That's going to be essential for energy release. It's found in bacteria, yeast, green vegetables, and cereals. You have vitamin B12. It's going to be good for absorption. Its absorption is going to be regulated an intrinsic factor from the gastric glands. It's going to help as part of a coenzyme needed for nucleic acid synthesis and for metabolism of carbohydrates and fats. And you can find these in things like milk, eggs, cheese, and meat. We also have our folic acids. Its function is going to be in metabolism of certain amino acids, synthesis of DNA, and normal production of red blood cells and white blood cells. It's going to be found in bacteria, leafy vegetables, and citric fruits. We have biotin. That's going to be one that a lot of people like to take to help their hair grow. Its function is going to be the metabolism of amino acids and fatty acids and the synthesis of purines. Then we have ascorbic acid, or vitamin C. That's going to be closely related chemically to monosaccharides. Its functions are going to be poorly understood, but it's thought that we need these to help produce things such as collagen, help with our metabolism, certain amino acids, and absorption of iron. There's actually no evidence that it's going to be beneficial in preventing things like the common cold. However, it might work in helping to create things like your antibodies. And these are going to be found in things such as citrus fruits, tomatoes, and green vegetables. Lipid-soluble or fat-soluble vitamins are going to occur in association with lipids. They're going to be influenced by the same factors that affect lipid absorption. So they can accumulate into the body, and they can actually be taken in such large amounts that it can become toxic to the body. So you've got to watch out with the fat-soluble or lipid-soluble vitamins. So you're going to have 4 different types that we're going to talk about. We have vitamin A, which, we're on the wrong slide, sorry. We have vitamin A, which is going to be synthesized from keratins. They're going to be stored in the liver. They're needed for production of pigments necessary for vision, normal health of epithelial cells, bone, and tooth growth. These can be found in orange, yellow, and green vegetables. This is also referred to as your retinols. So if you're putting on retinols on your skin, you're putting on a vitamin A substance to your skin. Next, we have vitamin D. That's going to be synthesized in the skin with UV exposure. It's going to be able to take the UV exposure and help change it over to an active version, vitamin D3, which is referred to as cholecalciferol. This is going to promote absorption and use of calcium and phosphorus, so it's going to be needed for normal growth, bone, and teeth formation. This can be found in things such as fish oil, egg yolks, and milk. You can also get it just from going out into the sun. Next, we have our vitamin E, and that's going to be called tocopherol. So with this one, it's a group of compounds that are going to be antioxidants. The precise functions are not really going to be known, however, it seems to help prevent oxidation of vitamin A and some fatty acids. It also stabilizes cell membranes and the formation of DNA, RNA, red blood cells, and helps with wound healing. You can get this from fresh nuts, seed oils, green leafy vegetables. And then we go into our vitamin K. Vitamin K has 2 different types. You can have K1 or K2. K1 occurs in foods, and K2 is going to be produced by certain bacteria that's normally going to be found in your GI tract. Now, these can be found in spinach, cauliflower, and cabbage, or like I said, it can be made by bacteria in your GI tract, and you can absorb it from there. Next, we are moving on to our minerals. So with minerals, these are going to be responsible for about 4% of your body weight. About 75% of these are going to be found in bones, teeth, such as calcium and phosphorus. They're going to comprise structural materials. They help function in enzymes, and they play a vital role in various metabolic processes. They do require relatively small daily amounts, so you do need to take these in your food. These are going to be inorganic substances, and you can find them in 2 different types. So first, you're going to have your major macro minerals. These are going to be needed in large amounts. These will be things such as calcium, which is going to help with the formation of bones and teeth. It helps conduct nerve impulses, contraction of muscle fibers. It helps with coagulation of blood, activation of enzymes, and it's going to be found in things such as dairy, eggs, green leafy vegetables, and whole grains. Next, you have phosphorus. It's going to be incorporated, for the most part, into salts of the bone and teeth. So you find that actually as a calcium phosphate salt or a hydroxyapatite is what it's referred to. It's going to play a role in nearly all metabolic reactions. It's constituent of nucleic acids, proteins, enzymes, and some vitamins. Also, it's going to occur in phospholipids of cell membranes. You'll find it in ATP, and phosphates that buffer the body's fluids. It's going to be found in foods such as dairy, eggs, meat, whole grains, legumes, and nuts. Next, you have potassium. That's going to help with maintenance of osmotic pressure. It helps regulate pH, metabolism of carbohydrates and lipids, conduction of nerve impulses, contraction of nerve muscle fibers, found in meat, whole grains, fruits, and vegetables. Next, you have sulfur. It's going to be incorporated mostly into the molecular structure of certain amino acids, and it can be found in meat, eggs, dairy, nuts, and legumes. Next, we have sodium. It's going to help maintain osmotic concentrations and help regulate water balance within the body. That's also going to be essential for nerve impulse conduction. It's essential for muscle contractions, helps with blood coagulation, and movement of substances through cell membranes. It's going to be found in table salt, dairy, meat, and eggs. We have chlorine. It's going to help maintain osmotic pressure, helps regulate pH, it helps maintain electrolyte balance. It's essential for hydrochloric acid formation. It's essential for carbon dioxide transport by the red blood cells, and can be found in table salt, meat, eggs, vegetable, and dairy. Next, we have what's referred to as our micro or trace minerals, and these are only going to be needed in small amounts, and you're going to have 6 main types. With these, you have iron, which is going to occur primarily in hemoglobin, which is going to be found in red blood cells, also in myoglobin, which is going to be found in muscles. Its reserve supply is going to be stored in the liver, spleen, and bone marrow, and is needed basically for the formation of vitamin A and part of various enzymes and other molecules. You can find these in liver, meat, green vegetables, eggs, whole grains, and legumes. Next, we have manganese. It's going to be most concentrated in the liver, kidneys, and pancreas. This is going to be necessary for normal growth and development of skeletal structures and other connective tissues. So it's going to be essential for synthesis of fatty acids within the body, cholesterols, and urea. And so you can find this in different foods such as meats, whole grains, legumes, nuts, tea, and coffee. Next, we have copper. Copper is going to be concentrated in the liver, heart, and the brain. It's going to be needed for hemoglobin synthesis, bone development, melanin production, and myelin formation. Remember that myelin is going to be important in nerves, or the axons. It helps that nerve signal to travel very fast. It's going to be found in liver, meat, fish, shellfish, legumes, whole grains, and nuts. Then we have iodine. It's going to be highly concentrated in the thyroid gland, and so it's needed. You get a lot of this from things such as fish and shellfish, but we also add iodine to our salt, so we use iodized salt a lot. It's going to be an essential component in the thyroid hormone, so if you don't have enough of this, then that's when your thyroid goes into hypothyroidism and it's underactive. And so it's often going to be added to foods. We have cobalt, which is going to be widely distributed throughout the body. It's essential in making vitamin B12. It's probably needed for the synthesis of several important enzymes, however they haven't described them or fully understood them yet. And you can find this in things such as meat and actually found in tap water. And then we go to zinc. It's going to be mostly concentrated in the liver, kidneys, and brain. It's constituent of several enzymes for digestion. We need them for respiration and bone metabolism. Also, it's going to be needed with liver metabolism. It's going to be found in liver, fish, and shellfish. We also have other trace elements such as chromium, fluorine, molybdenum, and selenium, but we only need those in very, very small amounts, and these are usually found in everyday foods. So, knowing all this, are dietary supplements necessary? Well, more than half the U.S. population takes a regular vitamin supplement. Most of these people do not need this. If you eat a healthy, well-balanced diet, then more than likely you're getting in everything that you need. And remember, you have to be careful, because if it's going to be a fat-soluble vitamin, then it is actually stored in your body and used as you need it, and it could actually become toxic. So how do organisms know what to eat? Do you eat the regular sugar cookies that have a lot of sugar in them, or do you eat the ones that are going to have the NutraSweet or the sugar substitute in them? Looking at a study, we had an experimental group where researchers randomly divided subjects into two groups to study their caloric intake. Group 1 got the treatment of the regular sugar cookie. Group 2 got the treatment of the NutraSweet cookie, so that's going to be the artificial sweetener. These subjects were going to be asked to keep diaries of all their eating in the day around the cookie eating event. The results: calories consumed, so the calories from sugar cookies compared to the calories from all other foods. And if you look at the calories from NutraSweet cookies compared to the calories of all other foods. And so out of that, you're going to see that the experiments have shown that individuals eating low-calorie cookies tend to increase their consumption of other foods so that their overall caloric intake is not going to be reduced. They still have about the same caloric intake. Lipids are going to provide the most kilocalories per gram of food. Remember, we talked about proteins having 4, carbohydrates have 4, but fats are actually going to have over double that. They're going to have 9 kilocalories per gram. So animals can meet their energy needs much more easily by seeking out and consuming fatty foods. So this can significantly reduce the time that we spend looking for foods if food's going to be scarce. So that's why we tend to have a taste or a want to eat fatty foods, because we're going to get the most bang for the buck with those, and we can spend our time doing something else. Unfortunately, since food is going to be easy to come by these days, we don't spend a lot of time hunting and searching for food. So we like to still eat those fatty foods, but we don't necessarily work those foods off. So what to eat? Like we said, instincts are going to cause animals that get hungry to seek out foods when they have a specific taste. So humans and other animals are going to show a preference to those fatty foods over carbohydrates. Or we tend to go towards protein-laden foods. And that behavior is going to be reinforced by the fat-laden food meal stimulating many rewarding centers in our brain. So they tell us that these are good, or they make us happy and release dopamines. So these preferences probably are going to evolve because fat has the most calories per serving. So we're going to extract energy and nutrients from our food. And in order to do that, we're going to have to be able to digest that food. And so we're going to talk about how the digestive process goes through 4 steps. We're going to have ingestion, where we're going to take in the food. Digestion, where we're going to break it up. Absorption, where we're going to take in the materials that we broke up. And elimination, where we get rid of everything that we did not use. First, starting us off with our first step, we have ingestion. Ingestion is going to be our first step in breaking down food. It's going to begin in the mouth, as the teeth are going to tear and grind that food while they mix it up with mucus and saliva from those salivary glands. And so that's going to help lubricate the food, as well as add in some enzymes to help the digestion process start. So with ingestion, food's going to be taken into the body, and it actually involves 5 anatomical parts. So we have the mouth, it involves the teeth, so you're going to have 32 of those secondary primary teeth. You have 16 on top, 16 on the bottom. And so they're going to help to tear and rip and break that food apart and to grind it. And so that main function is going to be mechanical digestion, breaking it into smaller pieces, increasing surface area, and that way it's exposed to digestive juices and the digestive action a lot easier. Then comes, like we said, those salivary glands. They secrete mucus, which lubricates the food and helps it pass to the stomach, and also enzymes such as salivary amylase, and that's going to help initiate the digestion of breaking down some of those starch molecules that are going to be found in the food. The tongue is going to be made up of skeletal muscle, and so that's going to help maneuver the food around in your mouth as you chew. It helps shape that food into a ball, and it's going to force it to the back of the throat for swallowing. It's going to contain lingual glands, which are going to secrete that salivary lipase, and then it's going to have a rough surface that's going to have two main functions. It's going to help guide the food around the mouth towards the esophagus, and it contains taste buds, which help you taste the food and help you want more food. Then it goes into the esophagus. That's going to be a collapsible tube that carries and transports food down to the stomach. So it's going to move from the back of the throat, you see the food bolus, down the pharynx, which is going to be the throat, into the esophagus. You have next what's called the esophageal sphincter. That's going to help regulate movement of the food into the stomach and also prevents backflow. And so that sphincter is going to be right before you come to the stomach. It's also referred to as the cardiac sphincter. Another thing that you're going to have in your pharynx or in your throat is going to be what's referred to as a tissue flap or your glottis or epiglottis. So that epiglottis is going to cover the glottis, which is the hole that leads to the trachea. This is going to help protect your air tube or your airway from getting food and any type of liquid down into that airway. So next you have what we refer to, let's go back, as peristalsis. And so as it goes down the esophagus, you're going to have that contraction of muscles. It's going to be waves of smooth muscle contractions that propel that food down towards the stomach. So basically, ingestion is that first phase of the digestive process, usually lasting less than a minute. It involves tearing, grinding a food, prepping it for it. It helps to lubricate it. It helps starts breaking down some of those starches. And so with that, it's prepared to go into the stomach. Next, we have the second phase. We have digestion, the process of dismantling large pieces of food into absorbable molecules. And this is going to involve two main organs. It involves your stomach and it's going to involve your intestines. So in the stomach, you're going to have acid and enzymes that begin protein digestion, and the contractions, which are going to be called peristalsis, and the addition of water, which helps create a liquid called chyme. So the stomach is going to be basically a J-shaped organ. It connects the esophagus to the small intestine and has three main functions there. Physically breaks down food and mixes it, secretes hydrochloric acid to further breaking down the food and kill bacteria, and begins that chemical digestion of proteins like we just said. Inside of the stomach, you have what's called gastric pits. That's going to produce hydrochloric acid and pepsinogen. Pepsinogen gets converted into pepsin when it's exposed to hydrochloric acid, and it's going to be the enzyme that's necessary for breaking down proteins. Chyme is going to be the semi-liquid mixture of food and those acidic juices, and it's going to pass into the small intestine, as you see in that picture where that number 3 is, through that sphincter. That sphincter is going to be referred to as the pyloric sphincter. Now that top sphincter that you see in the picture is going to be the cardiac or the esophageal sphincter. So that's your first one, goes through the stomach, and then to the second one, which is the pyloric sphincter. Now it's going to regulate food movement into the small intestine and also prevents backflow as the cardiac sphincter did. Next, we go into the small intestine. The small intestine is going to be an organ that extends from the pyloric sphincter to the large intestine. So it's going to be about 20 feet long. The main function here is chemical digestion. It's going to require the assistance of two other accessory organs. You're going to have the liver and the pancreas. So the small amounts of chyme are going to enter into the small intestine through that pyloric sphincter. The liver is going to produce bile. That's basically going to be made up of water, bile salts, bile pigments, cholesterol, and electrolytes. It's actually stored in the gallbladder. So it's made in the liver, stored in the gallbladder. It's going to be transported and mixed in with the chyme in the small intestine And that section that you see there that kind of goes together with the pancreas, that section of the small intestine is referred to as the duodenum. It looks like duodenum when you spell it out, but it's pronounced duodenum. And so what it's going to do is it's going to emulsify fats. Basically, it breaks them down into small particles that are easily digestible by the body. And so the bile salts are going to be responsible for that emulsification. So think of it as the Dawn dish detergent of your body. Also, the next organ is going to be that pancreas that you see there, where the number 2 is. It's going to secrete pancreatic juices. They consist of water, sodium bicarbonate, salts, and enzymes. So their 2 functions are to neutralize the chyme, because remember it just came out of the stomach, so it's highly acidic. So it's going to come in and neutralize, and then it digests carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And so it's going to mix with that chyme in the small intestine. Right there where you see that number 2. Then, cells within the small intestine walls are going to produce enzymes. So you have what's referred to as border enzymes. They're going to function in further digestion of carbohydrates, proteins, nucleic acids. These will be things such as lactase, aminopeptidase, and nucleosidase. You have chemical digestion. It's going to be completed when these carbohydrates, proteins, and fats are going to be broken down into component parts. So carbohydrates are going to be broken down into your simple sugars. Proteins are going to be broken down into the building blocks of amino acids. And then the fats are going to be broken down into their smaller portions, which are going to be the fatty acids. Sometimes you have bacteria. They're going to aid in digestion. And so these bacteria are going to actually help break down particles that your body couldn't. And it's going to be able to release those smaller particles into the bloodstream so you can absorb them and take them in. Here you see a leech that's going to be sucking from an animal. Looks like a human leg. Rather than its own enzymes breaking down the blood proteins into component amino acids, it's going to have a bacteria that is going to have shared in with it. That's going to help break those down. Digestive process also eliminates potentially harmful substances that are going to be ingested, including things like bacteria and even snake venom. So because the snake is going to have a mixture of proteins in its venom, it can be broken down in the digestive system. And from there, once it's broken down to smaller amino acids, they can become harmless. Okay. So lastly, with these, we have absorption, and that's going to be the process where those food particles are going to move from the digestive tract into the bloodstream. Then the cells are going to take those in and use them as building blocks. So those materials that are absorbed include things like the simple sugars, amino acids, lipids, electrolytes, vitamins, and water. And so looking here, you see within the stomach, you see those folds. You're going to have lots of villi. That's going to increase the surface area. It's also going to be very long, and then it's going to have microvilli on top of the villi that increase the surface area even more. So these are going to be 3 main anatomical modifications to the small intestine to help increase that surface area. So if you look at the first picture, the small intestine, it has what you refer to as circular folds. Look how it looks like little circle folds there. It has permanent ridges that are going to be found here. It causes the chyme to spiral, which enhances absorption, so it's not just going through like a straight line. The villi are going to be finger-like projections, which have a lot of blood vessels. And then the microvilli are going to be projections on top of the villi that are going to be absorptive. So those cells, which are found in the small intestine, are going to have what they call a brush border on them with those enzymes which help them absorb a lot. And so looking here, you can see how the nutrients gets absorbed into the cells. From the cells, it's then going to pass and diffuse directly into the bloodstream, where it's then going to be carried to the tissues that need it. The last step for food is going to be elimination. So that's going to be what's used to remove the unusable material from your body. So all the indigestible material gets discarded as a waste product. And that's going to involve one main organ. That's going to be your large intestine or large colon. Or colon. This organ is going to extend from the small intestine to the anus, and it can be anywhere from 3 to 6 feet long. Main function is going to be reabsorption of water, salts, and vitamins. It's going to have 3 main steps. So you have that remaining chyme that was indigestible. It's going to leave the small intestine and enter into the large intestine through the ileocecal valve. So it's coming out of that ileum, which is the last part of the small intestine, into the large intestine through that ileocecal valve. Here, water, salts, and vitamins are going to be reabsorbed into the body. Feces is then going to be stored in the rectum until it's ready to be eliminated. So feces basically is the indigestible materials, water, electrolytes, mucus, bacteria. It's actually about 75% water. It has what's referred to as a Goldilocks principle, and that refers to fecal matter consistency. So the best way, if it passes too fast, then it's going to be too watery. If it passes through too slow, it's going to be overly solid, so you become constipated. But it passes at just the right pace, then the feces is going to have a good consistency, and it will actually help clean out the digestive tract. Fiber that we get in our body mainly is going to come from foods with cellulose in it, so plant materials. It's going to help a smooth passage go through our colon. So basically it increases the fecal mass. It can help speed up the movement of chyme in the colon and helps make it easier to eliminate this waste. Now inside the large intestine, we're also going to find beneficial colonies of bacteria. They're going to be responsible for the final stage of digestion. They help ferment carbohydrates, they produce some of our B vitamins and vitamin K, and they break down some indigestible materials such as cellulose and plant starches. And then excretion is when it's the last phase of the food breakdown, and it's going to leave the body as it exits the large intestine through the rectum. So animals are going to have some alternative means for processing their food. For example, looking here, we have a ruminant animal. It's going to have a complex 4-part stomach that's involved, in which it's able to digest plant material that humans can't. So remember, we, for the most part, can't digest cellulose. So they're going to have a bacteria inside of their stomachs that's going to help them digest this. So with this, these animals are going to have that complex 4-part system. And so those multiple stomachs are going to be able to house cellulose digesting bacteria that's able to break it down. So basically what happens, the plant material is going to be swallowed and passed to the first part of the stomach. That plant material is then broken down by enzymes and cellulose digesting bacteria. Then the food is going to be regurgitated. It's chewed some more, swallowed again, and passed to the first chamber again, where that process repeats itself. Then, food is going to pass through the remaining chambers, where additional digestion is able to take place. Next, it's going to have what's referred to as a cecum. That's going to be a long outcropping of small intestine, and it contains cellulose digesting bacteria. Chyme passes to the cecum, and cellulose digesting bacteria help break apart the cell walls in the plant material. And so if you look here, you can see the small intestine, cecum, and large intestine. And so with the koala bear, for example, you see that cecum in the yellowy orange, whereas with the humans, you see that we really don't have a large section. We have a little section that comes off that they think that we might have used thousands of years ago to help ferment plant products or products with cellulose in them, and we've referred to that as our appendix. Coprophagy is going to be a process in which animals eat their own feces, so the food material is going to be passed through the digestive system twice. This is going to occur in things like rabbits, rodents, elephants, and gorillas. 3 main reasons animals utilize this process is that it increases the nutritional intake from a cellulose diet, it increases vitamin and mineral absorption, and the acquisition of bacteria to aid in digestion. So what we eat profoundly affects our health. So what constitutes a healthy diet? Well, we're going to have two main factors in choosing healthy, balanced diets. First, we have quality, and next we have quantity. And so basically with the quality, a healthy diet must contain a sufficient amount of each of the 6 categories of nutrients. So we have water, protein, carbs, lipids, vitamins, and minerals. And then quantity, we have to have a healthy diet has to contain sufficient energy. So it must be able to support an individual's metabolic needs and must not be no more than that person needs. So dietary guidelines are going to be developed every 5 years by the USDA. So that's when they go in and they update them. These guidelines currently recommend that you keep your weight within the recommended range, that you be physically active, you choose a variety of fruits, vegetables, grains, and particularly whole grains, non-fat or low-fat milk, and milk products. They also suggest you keep your diet low in saturated fat, cholesterol, and total fat. You keep your diet low in sugars relative to complex carbohydrates and fiber. You keep your diet low in salt, and if you consume alcoholic beverages, that you do so in moderation. So obesity can result from too much of a good thing. So why do we want to eat more than we should? Well, we think that it comes from an adaptation to thousands of years ago when we used to be hunters and gatherers and we actually had to go out and we had to find our food. So we have what's referred to as a BMI, or a body mass index, that we need to go by. So basically in terms of appetite, who are our most likely ancestors? Like we said, the more calories that we consume, the better the ability to weather times where food was going to be lacking. For example, times of drought, famine, or throughout the winter. So individuals who consume more calories were going to be the ones who survived, the ones who reproduced, and they became our ancestors. So we, as descendants, have the genes of those who were driven to consume, and therefore we're driven to consume. But in our modern environment, that is going to be very rare for us to find a famine, or to encounter a famine. As a result, our extra calories are going to be stored within our bodies, and we keep adding on to them, because food is easily come by this day and time. So going through, with the BMI that I just mentioned, it's going to be a tool based on a ratio of an individual's body weight to body height. The advantage of its use is that it shows healthy body weight ranges for average individuals. The disadvantage, it doesn't account for the body composition of people such as athletes or who run or exercise a lot. So you can figure out if you're within a healthy weight, overweight, or obese by taking your height and then going across and looking at the weight. Since fat cells can increase in number during the years of childhood and early teens, that makes it important to avoid obesity in those early years. Weight loss diets are going to be a losing proposition, mainly. Most of the time we have these fad diets that we see out. Some of the ones that have been recent were things such as the Atkins diet. And so you might see people lose weight a lot at first, but they don't tend to keep it off. So basically losing weight is going to be taking in fewer calories than you burn. And there's going to be 3 categories of weight loss interventions. We have drugs and other chemical interventions, which can range from products that interfere with fat digestion to appetite suppressants to artificial fats and sweeteners that can be absorbed, but these are only a short-term fix. Next, we have surgery, and so you can have 2 forms of surgery. You can have what's called liposuction. That's going to be the process where the fat cells are going to be vacuumed out of selected body areas, but this is only going to be short-term as well because you can build on to those areas that had the fat sucked out, so it can come back. And then you can have gastric bypass or banding. That's going to be where the stomach and small intestine are going to be reduced in size and length. This is going to cause a reduction in the amount of food that's able to be ingested, and so it is a long-term option, but generally reserved for severe cases of obesity. And then weight loss diets. So the most common strategy is to simply reduce your caloric intake. So here we have portion control and general caloric restriction. So with the fad diets, there's no evidence that these major diet programs are reliable and lead to long-term weight loss. Like I said, most of the time you do gain that weight back. 4 reasons that they tend to fail. Well, 1, it focuses on rapid weight loss rather than reduction. It reduces your muscle mass. Muscle is going to be important in speeding up metabolism. Weight reduction is going to result in body switching to emergency mode and actually preserving more calories. And then the 4th way is focusing more on eating habits while not including enough exercise. So example, low carbohydrate diets. So the 4 main problems with weight loss diets is you end up sometimes with nutritional deficiencies. So all these popular diets are going to be deficient in something, whether it's vitamins, minerals, or fiber. It reduces your metabolic rate, so your body's going to start burning food and calories and fat a lot slower. It's going to reduce your muscle mass and body fluids, so about 45% of weight loss is going to come in the loss of muscle mass lots of times. And so that's going to reduce your fat burning. And then it increases the lipoprotein lipase activity. So that low caloric intake is going to increase the activity of lipoprotein lipase. And what that lipoprotein lipase is an enzyme that converts nutrients in the bloodstream into fat storage. Diabetes is going to be a group of diseases in which the body's ability to regulate sugar levels is going to be disrupted. And so you're going to have 2 different types. You have type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. With type 1, it occurs when the pancreas does not secrete enough insulin in response to an increased blood sugar. This is going to be influenced by genetic and environmental factors and usually develops in childhood. The treatment for this is insulin injections and diet modifications. Now they have things such as the pump, which can increase the amount of insulin in the body as a response to how much you've eaten or how high the blood sugar has risen. Type 2 diabetes is going to occur when the pancreas secretes plenty of insulin, but the body's cells don't respond to that insulin. And so usually that's going to be due to a glucose receptor deficiency on the cell membrane. And so you see that in this picture here. More common, about 90% of cases occurring in overweight and obese individuals. So this is a common occurrence and it's becoming more common as time goes by. Usually it develops after the age of 40, but now we're starting to see it more frequently in teenagers and even in children. The treatment for this is going to be insulin injections and diets in low simple sugars, weight loss, and plenty of exercise. You also have what's referred to as diabetes mellitus. This is referred to as sweet urine. The problem is going to be regulating the blood glucose levels and can arise from either insulin scarcity or ineffectiveness. And so that's your type 1 diabetes. Remember that one occurs in childhood and usually the body doesn't produce enough insulin. So both in type 1 and type 2, insulin injections are going to be a type of treatment. Now there's an insulin pump. So food and infection. So spicy foods are going to be a natural antibiotic. Toxins produced by plants to fight bacterial infections are going to be what we refer to as spices. So if you look at this map here, you're going to see a strong correlation between regions that have high average temperatures, where microbial growth is going to occur more rapidly, and their use of spices that are going to be antimicrobial. So the theory is that spices can be beneficial in assisting our immune system against foodborne pathogens. So here you see some of the example of these spices. Garlic and onion, which are some that I use quite a bit. They're in 35 to 65% of all recipes. I use a lot of chili pepper too. 24% of recipes use this. And black pepper, lots of people use pepper in their food. And then you'll see some other. I use cinnamon a lot and oregano. So these are going to be some good antimicrobial spices. And that's going to end us for Unit 7.